Welcome to another episode of Life Stories with Marty, and to our listeners and viewers all over the world and here in Australia. And we do have a very special guest on. And to introduce our guest, I'm going to cross over to my colleague and dear friend up in Sydney, Michael Lyons. Michael, good
Good
morning to you.
morning or good afternoon, Marty from Sydney. It's a beautiful afternoon and the beginning of spring, a lovely 25-degree day, so it's beautiful. And we are very delighted and indeed honoured to have with us today Declan McCabe. And Declan is living in America, but he was born in the Emerald Isle, lived around the central part of Ireland, around the Athlone area for people listening around the world. And I suppose, Declan, I'd have to welcome you first to our program.
Happy to be here.
And
Honored.
welcome, Declan. Welcome to the show, my friend.
And now, Declan, to start off with, I didn't realize how you and Marty, connected. It was a kind of through a post, which happens a lot nowadays. We see people come up and post that we've known for years. But it was absolutely amazing the way you two people connected. So I'll leave it to you, Marty, to explain that.
Well, I just said, Declan, welcome. Thank you for coming on the show. And Declan and myself have a little bit of a history. Goes back in 1961 in the Congo and the siege of Jadotville, which is depicted on the movie The Siege of Jadotville on Netflix. Is Declan's father and my father were in Jadotville at the same time. And your dad was, I believe your dad was the oldest man serving in Jadotville at that time. Would that be correct, Declan?
He was either the oldest or close to it. He was a sergeant and older than his commanding officer.
Now, before we go, so talking about it, but before we go into that, give us, because your dad was always Army, sir, back and then in the railway and that. So just because we want to give you as much airtime as Michael said, it's your story. Give us from where you want to start, growing up, where you grew up, and a bit of history, because you have a lot of, which we'll go into, you have a lot of credentials. I was going to call you professor, and I wasn't sure, or call you scientist, but you have all those credentials. So if you can go in and tell us more about, just start at the start.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, if you want to go in the scientific direction, it's interesting. The United States, like for a country that is not into titles, they very quickly give you a title. So yeah, they call me professor at work. And I teach 20-year-olds, biology. And that's been my career for, 20 plus years at this point at St. Michael's College in Vermont. But, all of that started out in Athlone, going up and down to Shannon and fishing and catching bugs and the things that people do. When the other lads are playing soccer, there's always the kid like me who has a net and a bucket.
So tell us, we'll go into that further. Tell us a bit about your growing up. Give us a little bit, and your history, and your wife, Margaret, I believe.
Yeah.
Same name as my sister, so good name, Margaret.
It's a good name, yeah. Well, I grew up in Assumption Road in Athlone, and typical Irish neighborhood with lots of kids about the place. I was one of 6, and there was huge families on the road, so there was always someone to play with, out kicking around the place and catching frogs and the whole lot. And but I went to the Regional Technical College in Athlone after secondary school for a couple of years, and I was in the cafeteria one day and I found a pamphlet on the floor for working in America for the summer, teaching nature study. And after being a good Boy Scout for all the years, and after growing up in the Shannon and the woods and everything else, I figured I could go and do it, and I got the job. I ended up in the Philadelphia area, and I met Margaret literally the first day at the summer camp, and she had a cell on her T-shirt from Temple University's biology department, and fell madly in love, and the rest is history.
And what was it like growing up on Assumption Road and bringing your father a little bit there?
It was great, there was lots of opportunities to get out and do things. Dad was into the Boy Scouts and fishing and the boxing clubs and various things, and bird clubs. We had an aviary my brother was big into the birds and still is in the backyard, but you know, there'd be 100 canaries in in an enclosure in the backyard. And hedgehogs would wander in and you'd keep them, and there was frogs and newts and pike and perch and whatever you could catch in the Shannon or Lochary. It was really a great place to grow up, and the best neighbors you could ever have, you know.
Yeah. And
So
what was it? What was your school like there?
school, so I went to the Morris Brothers in for primary and secondary, and there was a teacher there, Luke Walsh, who got me going on science, and you know, I was already interested in it, and he fanned the flames. And then Neil Malloy was the biology teacher, and he was also fantastic. And there was another science teacher, Liam O'Cara. I never actually had him, but he was also very encouraging. Um, Anybody who was interested in science, you know. So yeah, school was great, a lot of fun, all of the craziness that you could imagine. Fellas getting locked out because they were late and sneaking them in the window, and you know, the usual things that happen.
Marty, can you pick me up now?
Yeah, we can hear you,
Yeah.
Michael. We can see you now. We
I'll
did lose
transfer
Michael.
to-
Sorry about that. We lost the signal for
Yeah,
a
I
couple of
transferred
seconds.
to the mobile phone, so I don't know what you're talking about. Your early life there, Declan.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Marty covered or not, but your father was one of 11 children,
Yeah.
which was probably typical of those days, a good Catholic man.
Yeah, not unusual in those days.
But and when you picked up biology, was there anything in particular that led you down that pathway? Because it's been really part of your life, and later on, of course, was there anything happened? Are you seeing something? Or I know you said your father made a garden for you at the back at one stage. Is that?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, the Assumption Road houses were sort of those World War II emergency era houses with the big long gardens, so you could be self-sufficient, you know.
Yeah.
And most people didn't grow a cabbage at all back there, but he did, and we always had stuff growing. So there was potatoes going and cabbages going and Brussels sprouts and the whole lot. And he had an aviary. He had pheasants back there for a while. We had chickens for a while. You know, rabbits at one point. So there was always something going on, and he did actually build me a little place where I could grow plants and have aquariums and stuff like that. So it was either my greenhouse or my lab, depending on what I was excited about at the time.
But looking at your father, Declan, he was a very active man, and I'm sure you took that from him. I don't think he'll let the grass grow under his feet. But tell me this. You said he joined the army during the emergency. It was compulsory. Yeah. Where then the gap when he finished after the emergency? Did he go to the regular army, or what happened in between that?
Yeah, well, he had been in the post office and he got drafted out of the post office into the army during the emergency.
Oh,
and,
during the emergency, yeah.
Yeah, and then he stayed in. So he stayed in infantry, and you know, while he was in the army, he ended up coaching. He coached boxing, he coached cross country. You know, he got a lot of training on physical fitness and coaching, and he spent a lot of his time, loved doing that. And his favorite role was actually to do that and be sergeant. That was where he would have stopped if he wasn't nearly compulsory promoted when they needed a company sergeant at some point.
So going back to that period of Jadotville, you don't remember that, do you, Dan?
No, so I was born in 66 and Jadotville was 61. So I heard about it growing up because I was the youngest, and the rest, you know, had either gotten married or gotten jobs or whatever, and they were out of the house at some point. And early on, he didn't talk about it a lot. And then as he got older and I was the only one left, really, you know, I got some of the stories that maybe the others didn't get, you know.
So how did you feel about that? Did it have any effect on you? Or was your father affected by it in any way?
He, you know, he would tell the stories periodically. They came out in dribs and drabs. He had an awful lot of faith in his commander and in the lads that were there with him. And he felt a great loyalty to all of them, you know. I think because he had so many interests and so many things to come back to, you know, he didn't have much time on his hands to dwell. And, you know, a lot of the lads came back and they had alcohol problems and mental health problems. And I think having a lot of interests and a big family to take care of, gave him some resilience.
That was
And
great. Yeah.
yeah, we were very lucky in that way. So
Yeah.
the only bit of bitterness I ever heard out of him was towards Conor Cruz O'Brien. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that.
We can forgive him for that.
That's the kind of
He wouldn't be alone.
But anyway, so well, that's great. Anyway, I got the picture there now of your father, and when he left the army, then he continued a very active life. Obviously, he was into everything.
Yeah, and he kept working. Like he didn't want to sit around the house, and so it would have been in his 50s, and he landed a job at Irish Cable and Wire. So he worked in and at that point, you know, when he'd been in the army, he could hop on the bike and be over to the barracks, no problem.
Yeah.
So he never had a car, never had a driver's license, never needed them. And then in his 50s, he had to go and do the driving test and get a car so he could get in and out to the factory.
So did you ever think about army as a career?
I did the FCA. So
Right.
I was in shooting targets and square bashing, as they call it, marching in the square.
Right.
But honestly, my favorite thing in there was orienteering. I had been on the cross country running team at in the Marist, and I wouldn't say I ever won anything in it, but I was middle of the pack, so to speak. So I was basically fit. And then I had done a lot of map work in the Scouts. So when they put a map on my hand and a compass in the FCA, you know, they put me on it's the army, so they look at your records and you've never done orienteering according to them. And so they put you on the novice course, and it was supposed to be I don't know, an hour course or something, and I finished it in a half an hour. And from there on, I hardly ever shot another target. They just put me on the orienteering, and there was an officer, Colm O'Din from Coosan. I'm sorry, Colm was his son, Tomas O'Din, and he and his sons, we went either to military orienteering competitions or we went to civilian ones, and we went all over the country, running around in circles in the woods, and it was fantastic.
That's great. Well, okay. Well, Marty, you were talking there about your wife Margaret and that, and you, first of all, you went to the USA. Did you go there to teach?
Yeah, I went. There were these back in the day, as they say, they had these J1 visas, and so you'd go as an exchange student, and there was something called the British Universities North American Club, and they would they'd pay for your flight, get your health insurance, and find you a job at a summer camp teaching nature study to city kids. And so I landed in Pennsylvania teaching nature study in the woods, which was a bit of a fantasy job for a 20-year-old.
And I was when I read your bio, I was very impressed. You have, I know you're very proud dad, but your kids, you have 3, I believe it is, 2 boys and a girl. Is that right?
2 girls and a boy. So
2 girls and a boy. I got that wrong.
Yeah. So they're doing well. The 3 of them, they're all doing their thing.
Me and my extension.
Yeah. Oh.
He's back. Very good. So yeah, Heather is the eldest, and she's off at the moment studying English in Ohio. She's doing a Master of Fine Arts.
Extension.
Yeah.
And Ethan is back with us, and he finished his degree in film, and he's working for the TV station here in Vermont. And then my youngest just started art school in Chicago. So they're all doing artsy things, despite having 2 scientists for parents.
You're very, very academic, as in, you know, but from coming from from Athlone, but from where you came from, you're growing up. You must be I know you can tell you're proud of your kids and your wife, but you must be proud of yourself as well, what you've achieved.
Yes,
you know, some of it is luck, some of it is interest, some of it is, you know, the things that make you happy. And the luck part of it comes in because honestly, when I realized I wanted to stay in the United States, I needed a student visa. And I needed somewhere to legally stay. I didn't want to be, you know, looking over my shoulder. So I got a student visa, and of course, get a student visa, you better be studying something. And so I finished a biology degree. I transferred the credits from the Regional Technical College in Athlone over to St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, and you know, so that kind of got me started. And you know, Margaret was definitely pursuing a very academic route.
Mm.
She was heading to Pittsburgh for the next thing, and so I wanted to find something to do in Pittsburgh, and I found a master's program over there, and that worked out beautifully. And the next thing, she got a job in Vermont, and I found a PhD program in Vermont. So, you know, you stitch it together and see where life takes you. And on the way through, I realized I really liked teaching the college age kids, you know,
Yeah.
20-year-olds. I shouldn't call them kids, they're adults, but that's
Yeah.
the age group I work best with.
Yeah.
And so I landed a job at St. Michael's College, and I've been there now for 23 years.
Oh my God.
So,
Yeah, it's been a great
Declan,
opportunity.
Margaret is a doctor in her own right. Is
Yeah,
she? What is she? What's her specialty?
neuroscience. So she looks
Oh,
at bladder function
good.
and spinal cord injury and how that impacts bladder function. So yeah, that's her claim to fame. I always say that she's a researcher who teaches a little bit, and I'm a teacher who researches a little bit. So that's the two of us.
So when did you decide you'd make America your home then? Because you must have a lot of aunts and uncles at home because of your father's family or having
Yeah,
11 siblings. So did it take you a while, or did you settle into America
it took a
life?
while. It
Did it?
it definitely took a while because you know you leave Athlone where you have, you know, 8 or 10 or 20 people you could meet into the pub any night and have a conversation with, and the various interests you have in a place. And you know, you go 3,000 miles away to where you know nobody other than Margaret.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it did take a while to settle in and figure out that it was going to be, you know, I was at one point I tried convincing her that maybe she'd like to go to Ireland, but that was a bit of a non-starter.
Did you actually want to move back to Ireland, Declan?
Well, I floated the idea, but not for very long. For the
Actually,
two of us,
you're only 3,000 miles away. We're 12, so
honestly,
we're
it's only around the corner.
around the corner. And so
It's one of,
listen,
yeah,
just so then if we carry on to your life, and you've written a lot of essays, is that right? And then you put them into like a book form, and you
that's exactly
call,
right.
and that was called Turning Stones. Now, Declan, that means nothing to me. I remember when we'd pass a river at home in Ireland, down Tipperary in the shore or something, we'd pick up a stone and we'd throw it across the river to see it skating across.
Yeah.
Well, that's the nearest I've ever got to stone. So
As I said to
Yeah.
Declan, when Declan was saying earlier that we used to grab tadpoles and we used to go down to the streams down in Tipperary and we'd stand in the water and you could even fish there with the little fish, but we'd always let them go.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I
I
suppose
was,
the question is, why did you? I was just thinking, wasn't there a movie recently that won an award that's something to do with water? But yeah,
well,
no,
now I'm drawing a blank on the movie.
okay.
I have no idea.
So how did you? It's a very deep subject, is it? Like pretty academic. You need to be into it to get it, or what? Explain to
Well,
us a bit about the book.
I'll tell you who's really into it, into this topic. You know, is that people who go fishing for trout are very much into the insects. You know,
Oh yeah,
and you know, if you think about a typical river, the leaves fall in, and that's the base of the food web. That's what feeds everything. And nobody has ever taken a leaf and put it on a hook and caught a fish. You have to get the bugs. So the bugs eat the leaves and the fish eat the bugs. And if you didn't have the leaves falling in and the bugs in there, you wouldn't have the fish. Personally, I've always been more interested in the bugs than the fish.
That's so environmental, and my daughter is big time into it. My oldest daughter, Jordan, I'm
Yeah.
fascinated. Just listen to you. I thought the story. I thought this is about water, like Michael. I'm thinking, but just what you just said there. So carry on. Give us a little bit more educational because we want to
All
give you
right.
as much time.
Well, the book title, Turning Stones, the easiest way to get in and find some cool insects in a river is to turn over the stones, and they'll be on there. And anything that sticks to a stone in a river was put there by an insect. Things don't just, you know, arbitrarily stick onto a stone.
Yeah.
So the caddisflies in particular are using silk to tie themselves on. They make little stone structures and stick structures, and they attach themselves onto rocks, or they're grazing the algae from the rocks. So turning stones is a metaphor for finding the bugs, essentially, and finding the link between the base of the food web and the fish, if you like. But there's all sorts of fascinating bugs in a typical river or in a pond. There'll be different ones in a pond, you know. So the rivers have a very because of the flow, it's flushed out frequently. So you've got a very different cast of characters living in there. And the ponds, the water slows down and all that sediment settles. And it's a very different environment. It's tough to live with all that sediment stinking down around you.
And
So you've
Declan,
got
I've listened to your podcasts, and I'll get you to
ah
give a
well,
shout out at the end on your podcast. I think it's fascinating. As I said, it wasn't my cup of tea,
yeah,
but
yeah,
when you listen to it,
Cup
it
of
actually
water.
draws you into
yeah.
it. But tell us about why you started and what your podcast is about for listeners.
All right. Well, the podcast was a way of sort of getting the content out so people could learn a little bit more about the bugs. You know, there's the most recent one was about it's called Life, Death, and Black Flies. It's about these flies that solved a murder, you know. So I tried to find an interesting spin, a human connection. You know, there's always something that connects people to these kinds of things. And the black flies, because they were stuck in the windshield of this car that was submerged in the river with a body in it. The husband said that his wife had been visiting friends over the winter, and he'd been in touch with her and this and that. But they sent off the cases of the black flies to an entomologist, and he said, no, that car's been in the river since September, based on the bugs.
Oh my God. They're little
Incredible.
investigators.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, you
So,
know,
so Declan, when you're teaching, what would
yeah,
you have a class? You said you have a class maybe of 20 or 30 students,
yeah,
and it's now that you're talking about it, it is quite interesting.
Mm,
How
yeah,
does that
totally.
relate to, like, we say, a lake? Now, a lake would be
yeah.
totally different again, would it?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll give you an example. We just got back from Connecticut. We took two
Yeah.
vans, we drove down, and we were actually working in saltwater down there. And so yeah, you're right. A lake has a very different set of things versus a river. And of course the oceans have different yet again. And
Yeah.
so, but usually the class would be the big class I have has 36 or 37 students in it. And then we break them down into smaller groups for doing lab exercises. And when I say lab, you know, for me, that means the lab isn't really going to be in the building very much. It's going to be in Lake Champlain or in a river, or in this case in the ocean. But
Yeah.
the you know the because of the standing water in and the different conditions settling down into a lake, you get things like bloodworms, for example. They've got hemoglobin on their skin, so they can suck that last bit of oxygen out of the water and not suffocate.
Right.
You know, you
Oh,
wouldn't get them in a clean river, for example.
Yeah.
And so you can also pick up how clean is a river based on the bugs. So if you go to a city stream, you're going to find maybe a half a dozen species. If you go to a stream in the woods, you might get 27, 28, or 40 species, depending on how clean it is.
yeah,
So
yeah.
So,
yeah, it's important for that.
Declan, would you spend a lot of time on your own then, out in the river and
Yeah,
like fishing? You're there, just you and the world and the
yeah.
trees and the water.
In between
You'd be
times.
happy in that.
Oh yeah, if I had a half an hour to spare now, there's an electrical right of way out of the neighborhood. So you know the wires go through, and so you can't build a house underneath. So you can take a nice walk under the power lines, and 5 minutes later you're in the woods, and you can pop down there, and you're on the bank of the Winooski River, and it's a great place just to stretch your legs and see what cool bugs you're gonna find, or birds you might hear, or whatever else. And you know you're only 20 minutes from an international airport, and yet you'd feel like you're the only person in the world, you know?
Yeah, it's a spiritual experience, really, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, very
You know,
much
we
so.
all grew up, a lot of us grew up watching, there was a TV show, A Mock Queen Spare, means Out Under the Sky, Eamon de Butler, and there was another
Right.
one, To the Waters in the Wild with Garrett Van Gelderen, and those TV shows back in Ireland, and Grizzly Adams was the other strange one.
I remember that one.
Remember
Yeah.
Grizzly, yeah.
So those shows like would also hook you in a little bit, and I found those. I would be waiting for those to come on, you know. But it sticks with you then, you know. So
And
yeah, I love to
Martin,
get out.
Martin again, Declan, Is there anything that we, as who don't know anything about that we're doing that we shouldn't be doing to the rivers at the moment that you've identified for probably for just in the interest of clean water? Are we doing anything?
There's
good question.
There's some very simple things that people could do better. And so, without getting excessively preachy here, anyone who has a roof has to decide where the water is going to go when it rains, right? So you can put the gutters out onto the street or the driveway, and they're going to run fast into the river, and they're going to cause a bunch of erosion. Or you could take the same drain pipe and you could point it out onto your lawn, and there's a chance for that water to sink into the ground and get filtered and to get very slowly released. So that simple thing. I mean, sooner or later, if you have gutters at all, sooner or later they're going to have to be replaced, and that's the opportunity to redirect the water and stop it eroding the riverbanks. And it seems simple, one house eroding the riverbank, but if there's 100 houses sending the water, you do actually erode the riverbank. And if we can get the message out, one by one, get the water onto your lawn, put it into a rain garden. You don't even need a rain garden, bit of grass. Put the water into the grass.
That's a great message.
Yeah,
simple.
And what do you reckon about washing your car on the side of outside the house?
Well, if you're going to wash the car anyway, you could either take it to a place that is filtering the water, which most of them, it's economic.
Yeah,
it's economic for them. They don't want to put the water straight through, and most of those places are filtering the water, so that's the most efficient way. But if
you can actually put if you have the hose going out into your garden from your gutters, then you could actually just put a pipe and put a spray on it, and you could just drive your car underneath and wash your car at the same time.
See, all in one shot. Or a simple thing enough is instead of washing the car on the driveway, wash it up on the grass.
Yeah,
and
that's what we do. Yes.
Yeah. Soapy water going to the grass.
Yeah,
and you might even kill a few pests.
Well, Declan, without water, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be talking about the subject. And I think here in Australia, because of the future, I think they're pretty good at that advice now in car washes and how you dispense of your water. And as Marty said, wash your car if you're going to do it on the grass. So we're a kind of, but not that we all do it, but it's only small things, but they can make a huge difference.
Yeah,
that's a great subject. Yeah.
There's another thing. A lot of people think that when the water goes onto the street and into the drain pipe or into the manhole, they think it's going to be treated somewhere. But in most cases, it goes through a simple manhole system and it ends up in the river. A lot of people don't realize it. One of my neighbors used to regularly pour paint down the drain because he figured, it's going off to the sewage plant. And I said to him, maybe it's not ideal. And he said to me, it's going to the sewage plant. And then I called the town and I said, hey, I don't report this fella at all, but could you put a few signs on the drains that say, hey, drains to a river? And they came out. They had the signs sitting over in the South Burlington office. They put the signs on all the drains saying drains to Lake Champlain. And he never poured paint down the drain again once he saw the sign.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a little bit of education.
Yeah. Declan,
over here, you would be fined for that.
Yeah, but 50 years ago, I was in the automotive industry, and I had a workshop. And believe it or not, they used to pour oil down the drain. Because so just lack didn't think about it, of course. And as the years went on, they ended up tracing it where the oil went, and they came to the company I worked for, and they said to me, if you don't put in some kind of a system to manage your oil, you're going to be a heavy fine. So that was about over 50 years ago. So people were doing silly things, as you said, pouring stuff down the drain that they didn't, just because it disappeared, they didn't worry too much about where.
But I think that was lack of education.
It was.
People didn't know. They didn't literally pour it down on purpose. A lot of companies did take shortcuts, which was wrong. But in general, what you're doing, Declan, is, and you've actually educated us just talking. I can see it even on Michael's face, is because he's drinking water now, and it's not from the stream. It's because educating people and I'm looking forward to hopefully putting your podcast as well on ours, because people should listen to this. And as I started the interview and myself, Michael, is I didn't know much about this, but it's and I think what I'm gathering, what you're alluding to, is if everyone just does their little bit,
Yeah.
that builds up. As you said, each house wasting whatever it may be and not recycling properly and
Yeah.
everything like that, that builds up, and it's education. And I thank you for that.
But after
Yeah,
listening to you, Declan, the science itself, the way you explained it, I think now when Brad said to me, we're going to talk about water, I said, are you for real? Or are you on drugs or something? I said, how can you talk about? But it actually is absolutely very, very educational. You're a great educator in that field, I would assume, by your
and it makes sense.
Career. And listen, just to finish off, we're running a bit out of time. Do you ever get back to Ireland, or do you ever want to get back there, Declan?
Yeah,
family?
yeah. I get back, you know, with the 3 kids, it was always expensive to go. But more recently, I've actually started teaching a course. We call it Coastal Biology of Ireland, and we brought students this year in July over to Dingle, and we spent 2 weeks in Dingle, and that's been an opportunity. And I always try to make sure I connect with the family when I'm over there. And this time, my daughter came with me, and we traveled up to Athlone after the course was over, and stayed a couple of days there, and traveled over to Dublin and saw Dublin, you know. So more in the last few years, I've been getting over much more frequently than I used to.
Yeah, of course, going back to what we started with Jadotville, Athlone and the Barrett soldiers there, they were very much
Assumption Road. Assumption Road was the main.
Yeah, but A Company was they were a lot from that part of Ireland, and they probably suffered the most because of the trail and all that in the pubs, the pubs of Athlone and Mullingar. They went through a horrific time because of what they had to go through. After coming back,
But when you think about it, I've thought about it for sure. Like, I wouldn't be here if they hadn't done their job and done it well.
And
they all came home alive. And
that's right.
If you were to do the sums with Irish families, how many children of Jadotville are there?
No, can I answer that, please, Declan? Leo Quinn and myself did that over a year ago. There's 10,000 plus.
Wow.
I've done my fair bit. I've got 5 in there. But and then that's from the kids of the men like yourself, and you have children. You can count you as there's 5. You know, but you can consider them there's 10,000 plus. But what I think is, out of that 155 men, 154 men, is 10% committed suicide. And a lot of their parents as partners, I beg your pardon, the wives and that, I think from my recognition and my own experience, 3% of them committed suicide. And then there was lots of children attempted murder-suicide with certain things. So no, there's 10,000 plus, my friend Declan, that includes you. And think about it, in 1961, our dads were POWs in the Congo. I mean, you know, crazy. So we're blessed, and that's why I say I give my hat off to you. I'm going to get you to get the last word, and Michael, but I put my hat off to you, what you've achieved, and I want you to do a shout out as well to tell us a little, not a little bit, but shout out about your book, as in where can people buy this book? Where can they get it from? Anywhere in the world, which we will put it up.
So anyway. The full title is Turning Stones, Discovering the Life of Water. So it was by Down East Books out of Maine, but it's available on, you know, Amazon. It's available on Barnes and Nobles, and I see it a lot in these small independent bookshops. And you can get it in Athlone bookshop if anyone's listening.
Yes, there you go.
What's his name? Stephen Reynolds hosted me there, and we had a great old time. I don't know how many people in the space. It was fairly full, but it was fun to connect to a whole bunch of Athlonians, including a Maris teacher and a few of my classmates. So and a lot of family. So but you can get it in all the usual places. and certainly in the local bookshops as well. And if it isn't in your bookshop, ask them to get it and they'll get it.
That's right. I was going to say, Athlone will be busy when this goes out. Now, just tell us
Yeah.
also, how can people go onto your podcast? What's
The
what's
podcast
the site?
the podcast is called Nature Snippets, and I launch it from oh God, it was called Anchor. What's it called now? It goes on to
Spotify.
it's
podcast.
Spotify. It goes out through Spotify, and then it gets picked up by Apple Podcasts, and it gets picked up by all of the usual places, as many as I could think of. And it's yourself, when you put it out, if you just click the right box, you can make it appear by magic.
That's
And I
right.
wasn't trying to do this, but it shows up on Amazon as well. And for that reason, I started adding a picture with every episode, because the pictures look great on the Amazon site.
They do. I actually watched I did watch your podcast last night before the preparation of this, and I was, as Michael said, this conversation alone about water, as Michael said, what's this water boy talking about? When I actually learned a lot from it, because you kind of dig a little bit deeper than it's not just about what's under the in the streams. It's how the humans are affecting that, and how that will affect us. Would I be correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's one piece in there. I actually wrote it with a friend, Ellen Martinson. She studies parasites in birds, and it never occurred to me that our local loons are actually getting malaria, if you can imagine. Loons would be what Irish people would call a diver. So loons and divers are the same thing, two cultures divided by a common language and all that stuff. But the malaria has moved north into New England on this side of the ocean, and the insects that spread the malaria have moved north. And a bunch of the most common birds in our backyards here have also moved north with the changing climate. So that, before the scientists were aware of the changing climate, the birds were moving north. And before the politicians would admit that the climate is changing, the birds were moving north.
Would you agree with me, Declan? And I'm going to let you go after this. I'll put Michael on for the finishing. But climate change, this is all effects. But I believe what you're doing is talking about education is, and I know my daughter, as I repeat this, but people do their little bit, and they have to realize what they're doing for the future of it. Yes, politicians and that, this, some are good, some just believe it's all made up, but it does happen. And I can say with Michael and myself, Michael's up in Sydney, I'm in Melbourne, and I've never seen such unusual and change of weather here in Australia.
And we're experiencing the same. We have increased rainfall, increased intense storms. It's all happening. And the sea level has already risen a substantial amount, and there's more coming. So it's all around us. The evidence is everywhere. Hard to ignore.
If I can ask you a favor, can you just shout out to my daughter Jordan O'Connor, because she will be fascinated with this. She works in that whole thing with she's big, and the other family members. So say hello to my daughter Jordan.
And is Jordan working in Australia?
Yeah, she lives. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah,
fantastic.
She's here in Melbourne. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, and sorry,
I was going to say that's the other piece of it. For my students and for someone like Jordan as well, there are actually opportunities out there. You can make a career out of this strange water stuff.
I know. And I have my youngest is hitting 18, not my youngest, but the other one 18 coming up. And she went to Nepal and that for a working thing, to live with the people and work how things were done. So that's how much she's into it. But listen, Declan, I'm going to have to let you go. We've taken up enough of your time. We're running in the show. And Michael, I'd like you, I haven't stopped talking. I'll give you the second last word.
Well, Marty, it's very difficult to stop you talking.
Thank you.
You must have been vaccinated with a gramophone needle when you were very young. But listen, no.
I'm going to cut that bit out.
I'd just like to maybe reflect on maybe going back to our main programs, Declan, are on moral injury, as you probably know.
Yes, I'm aware. Yeah, I follow the site. Oh, Michael is
I
frozen.
think we've lost Michael there. We have lost Michael.
Pam?
You're back. Sorry, Michael. We lost you for a second there.
I said the Jadotville situation and the betrayal of the men there is now a worldwide, known worldwide, and it's actually being used in many army units and people with moral injury to explain how it can happen.
Absolutely.
And we have now all the 155 people. Many of them came back and they were just, as you say, normal. But a section were affected by it, and they didn't get the support, and they didn't have the support, or they didn't have psychiatrists and counselors. I don't know. The fact is, the betrayal it took them 40 years to at least do something about it. And your father, I don't know when he passed, if he got his Jadotville medal or not.
No, he passed in 2000.
Yeah. So there you go. And to talk to you, and we've met a lot of people along the way who have been affected by it, because it is transgenerational.
Yeah.
Moral injury. And speaking to you, Declan, and your scholarship and what you're doing, I think it's very enlightening for people who may some way be in a dark place to think, well, there's a man who did come through it, and he's normal, and he's a scholar in his own right. And I just think you're a great example for that particular incident that happened way back. And today or yesterday, I think, was the anniversary of the
men
Jadotville coming out of when they were released from the prison. As prisoners of war. And actually, that was against the Geneva Convention to even put them in. Everything was so wrong. But anyway, that's not for today. But thank you so much for sharing with us, Brendan. Our Declan.
Can I share one thing with you?
Yes, please.
When my dad was ill towards the end of his life, I had the opportunity to go and visit him in Portiuncula Hospital in Ballinasloe, and he had lost his voice through a sort of a mini stroke event, and his voice was slowly coming back, and it came back, and I was the only one there because I had traveled over without family, and he just started chatting, and there was no stopping him. And he talked about various things. He talked about Boy Scouts and family and friends and everything else, but he got around to Jadotville, and he was in his 80s, and he was, I wouldn't say he was on his deathbed, but he was close. And he did talk about Jadotville, and it was a privilege to hear those stories and to hear about them, taking out the snipers that were trying to take them out, and how they did that, and other events like hollowing out termite mounds and moving inside to create firing positions inside a termite mound. Who would think of it? Only the Irish soldiers.
Well,
it stuck with him his whole life.
Pat Quinlan was recognized as one of the great leaders actually now in military history, and he's been quoted. His strategy has been quoted in many military books. How he saved 155 men from being losing a life. But we could talk all day about it. But it's great. Your input, Declan, is fantastic, and I wish you and your family well. And I hope your election in America goes the way it should go, because whatever you do in America affects us over here. I see they've cut interest rate.
That's right.
They've cut interest rate by 0.5%, which was a good start.
I told you no politics, Michael. My mom said in a conversation, no politics, religion, or sex. They'd be in trouble. Declan, listen, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and thank you so much. We'll stay in contact, and we will put up Declan's book contacts and his story onto his podcast as well on the end of this podcast. Declan, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Declan.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Michael.
Really, and Michael, my friend, may I just shout out, Michael is fighting his own battle with cancer. And Michael, I thank you for getting up this morning, and he was determined to do it. You are a dear friend, as I call him, my adopted dad, I won't tell you what he calls me, but anyway, that's close enough.
Okay,
Okay.
crazy comes in.
We didn't. I can edit that bit. Listen, thank you to our audience here in Australia and all over the world. And for this podcast, please go to moralinjuryinternational.com. Moralinjuryinternational.com. Thank you, guys, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you to all.
Thank you both. Amazing. Honored to be on.
Thank you, guys.
All right, and that's free and clear now. You're set.